Skyrim has over 30 female followers, and every single one of them tells you something about how Bethesda builds companions. From warriors with zero personality, to a literal cannibal who thinks eating people is a spiritual experience, to one character who got more dialogue than the rest of the roster combined. Today, I'm breaking down every female follower in the game and everything that makes them worth recruiting or avoiding, starting with the one you meet first, Uthgerd the Unbroken. Uthgerd the Unbroken sets the tone for Skyrim's entire companion system, and that tone is punch a stranger in a bar and now they'll die for you. She's sitting in the Bannered Mare in Whiterun, one of the first buildings most players stumble into. You talk to her, she challenges you to a fist fight, you win, and congratulations. You now have a lifelong travel partner. The whole interaction takes about 45 seconds. Here's the thing, her epithet, the Unbroken, comes from a much darker story. She wanted to join the Companions, and during her trial she accidentally killed a young boy she was sparring with. They rejected her for it. Unbroken refers to the fact that the rejection never broke her spirit. She's still fighting, still proving herself, just in a tavern instead of Jorrvaskr. And yet, the player who 5 minutes ago was almost executed flattens her in seconds, which is, not ideal for the brand. She wears steel plate armor, carries a steel greatsword, and is classified as a warrior-type follower with solid heavy armor and two-handed skills. Functionally fine, narratively undercooked. That whole companion's rejection story, you get it in maybe 2 lines of dialogue and then it's never mentioned again. The game does absolutely nothing with it. It's lore decoration. You can also marry her, which means you're taking a rejected companion with a tragic past and forcing her into domestic life. Hey, you know that thing where you punch people to cope with guilt? How about you manage my cabbage garden instead? She's the baseline. No story, no drama, just fists and regret. But if you think that lack of depth is bad, wait until you meet the follower who somehow has even less personality. Jenassa is the most honest follower in Skyrim, and nobody appreciates her for it. She's standing in the Drunken Huntsman in Whiterun, which is literally a tavern that doubles as a hunting goods shop. You walk in, hand her 500 gold, and she follows you. No quest, no backstory revelation, no prove yourself worthy nonsense. Just a Dunmer with a hunting bow and dual wielding blades who looked at your coin purse and said, yeah, that works. You can recruit her within the first hour of a new playthrough, and she will not pretend to care about you for even a second of it, and honestly, that's kind of refreshing. Jenassa specializes in light armor and one-handed weapons, making her a solid companion for early stealth builds. She's competent in a fight, handy with a bow, and switches to blades when things get close. Mechanically, she does exactly what you're paying her to do, nothing more. But here's the thing, she has zero involvement in the main quest, zero connection to the companions, the college, the thieves guild, the civil war, nothing. She's a dark elf with some bloodthirsty commentary and a taste for killing, but she never mentions Morrowind, never references the refugee crisis, never gives you a single breadcrumb of personal history. She talks about the thrill of the hunt. She talks about shadows and silence. That's the whole relationship. Most players forget she exists entirely. Community discussions about Jenassa usually boil down to one question. Is she underutilized, or is she the most realistic mercenary in the game? Because in a world where every follower wants to trauma dump on you after 3 conversations, Jenassa just shows up, does the job, and occasionally whispers something unsettling about enjoying the kill. She's the follower equivalent of hiring a moving company. They're not your friends, they're carrying your stuff. There's something weirdly respectable about a companion with zero emotional attachment to your destiny. She doesn't care that you're the Dragonborn, she cares that you paid. But if Jenassa is the most forgettable follower in Whiterun, the next one might be the most forgettable in the entire game. Ayla is the first follower on this list who actually feels like a person. Uthgerd fights for coin, Jenassa fights for coin, Ayla fights because she's a senior member of the most prestigious warrior guild in Skyrim, and she has things to do. The difference is night and day. She's one of the Circle, the inner leadership group of the Companions, operating directly under Kodlak Whitemane. She's not waiting in a tavern hoping some adventurer walks in with 500 gold. She already has a job, a rank, and people who answer to her. You don't recruit Ayla, you earn the right to fight alongside her, and that process takes actual effort. You need to join the Companions and complete roughly 2 to 3 quests in their storyline before she even considers following you, which, compared to punch Uthgerd in the face once, feels like a genuine accomplishment. But here's where it gets interesting. Recruiting Ayla doesn't just give you a companion, it changes what you are. She's a werewolf. During the companion's questline, you can contract lycanthropy directly from her, permanently altering your character's biology and gameplay. No other follower on this list comes with that kind of baggage. You're not just picking up a sword buddy, you're fundamentally rewriting your character's identity because this woman offered you her blood. Her combat style reflects that duality too. She wears ancient Nord armor, carries a hunting bow, and defaults to daggers when things get close. Half ranger, half scrapper. It works. Her dialogue is equally sharp. She references her hunting philosophy, her lineage as a companion, and her fierce independence within the guild. She never asks for validation. She never needs rescuing. She's marryable, sure, but good luck pinning her down. She retains her companion's schedule even after the wedding, so don't expect her to be home for dinner. The community is split on her. Some players love the confidence and see her as Skyrim's strongest female warrior archetype. Others find her dismissive of player input, like she's tolerating your presence rather than enjoying it. And the lycanthropy thing raises genuine moral questions about what the companions actually are underneath all that honor talk. But regardless of where you land on Ayla, she's proof that quest-locked followers are just built different. And speaking of followers with dark secrets, the next companion on this list makes Ayla look like an open book. Njada Stonearm. Njada. Stonearm is what happens when a developer needs to fill a roster and runs out of time on a Friday afternoon. She's a Nord warrior, a member of the Companions. She wears steel armor, she swings a sword, and that is genuinely everything there is to say about her. But I'm going to try anyway. To even recruit Njada, you need to join the Companions and progress through their questline. That's a real-time investment for a follower who has exactly two meaningful dialogue trees. One is a greeting, the other is a comment about how she prefers hitting things. That's it. That's the whole personality. 2 lines. Most grocery store receipts have more character development. Her combat role is heavy armor and one-handed weapons, which would be fine if Skyrim didn't already have about 6 other followers doing the exact same thing, but better and with actual backstories attached. She's not the strongest. She's not the most interesting. She doesn't have a unique weapon or a personal quest or even a mildly compelling opinion about the weather. But here's the kicker. Njada is flagged as essential during the Companion's questline, but once you finish it, she loses that protection entirely. She can just wander into a giant camp and get launched into orbit permanently. And most players would never notice because they never planned to recruit her in the first place. There is almost certainly a version of Njada that existed on some developer's design document with a real backstory, actual dialogue, maybe a side quest involving her name or her fighting style. We didn't get that version. We got the skeleton, the placeholder that accidentally shipped as a recruitable follower and has haunted community worst follower rankings ever since. She's not bad, she's just nothing, which is honestly worse. But at least Njada had the dignity of being forgettable on her own terms. The next companion on our list somehow managed to be even less developed, which I didn't think was possible until I checked. Rhea is the rookie. She's the wide-eyed trainee who joins the Companions right alongside you, eager to prove herself, ready to learn from the best. And on paper, that's actually a fantastic setup for a follower. A character who grows with you, who starts out green and gradually becomes a hardened warrior through shared experience. That's the kind of arc that writes itself. Except nobody wrote. What you actually get is a character with roughly the same depth as a loading screen tip. She wears steel armor, swings a one-handed weapon, and says approximately 4 things, all of which amount to hello, or I'm fighting now. Her combat AI feels noticeably rougher than the senior Companions members, which could have been an intentional design choice to sell her inexperience. Could have been. But without any corresponding growth mechanic or dialogue progression, it just feels like she got less development time, which, she absolutely did. Here's what makes Rhea frustrating. The framework is right there. You have a trainee who idolizes the Companions, who looks up to Ayla and Skjor, who joins at the exact same time as the player. That's a mirror character. That's someone whose journey should parallel yours. She should be commenting on your shared progression, reacting to guild events, maybe even expressing doubt or fear before the bigger fights. Instead, she stands in Jorrvaskr and exists. Her race is Imperial, which you'd barely know from anything she says or does. There's almost zero cultural flavor, zero personal history, zero anything that makes her feel like a real person with a background. Nobody cared enough to flesh that out, and honestly, that tells you everything. The community barely discusses her. When she does come up, the consensus is the same every time. She was probably planned for something more and got cut down to a shell, a coming-of-age arc that never came of age. But if you think the Companions have a monopoly on underdeveloped followers, wait until you meet the woman in Riften who actually had a story worth telling. Lydia, she is the most famous companion in one of the biggest RPGs ever made, and she has almost no personality. Let that sink in for a second. Lydia has been memed, mourned, married, and murdered by millions of players across over a decade, and the woman has maybe 12 lines of dialogue. Most of them sound like she'd rather be literally anywhere else. Here's how you get her. You kill a dragon outside Whiterun, the Jarl names you Thane, and Lydia just appears. No recruitment quest, no persuasion check, no gold exchanged. She's simply assigned to you like a piece of furniture that can swing a sword. She shows up in steel armor with a steel sword, block skill sitting around 50, ability, solid one-handed proficiency, and an attitude that suggests she lost a bet. And then she says it. I am sworn to carry your burdens, delivered with the enthusiasm of someone being asked to hold your grocery bags in a parking lot. That single line became one of the most quoted pieces of dialogue in gaming history. Not because it's clever, not because it's emotional, because it sounds like she genuinely does not want to be there, and somehow that resonated with every single person who played this game. But here's the thing. That emotional distance isn't a bug. Her dialogue is written to never progress beyond professional courtesy. She doesn't warm up to you. She doesn't open up about her past. She doesn't have a past, at least not one the game bothers to mention. Every interaction stays at exactly the same temperature, which is lukewarm at best. And that's intentional. She's a mirror. Players projected entire relationships onto a character who gives them absolutely nothing back. People genuinely felt guilty when she died, and she has no unique death dialogue to soften the blow. She just drops. People married her and role-played entire love stories despite her dialogue making it completely one-sided. She remains loyal even if you join the Stormcloaks and actively oppose Whiterun, the hold she's sworn to protect. She just doesn't care, or she does care and can't express it. Nobody knows, because Bethesda wrote her with the emotional depth of a filing cabinet. The fandom has been split on this for over a decade. Half the community thinks she's tragically underutilized, a character who deserved her own questline and real development. The other half thinks the blankness is the point, that her professionalism is what makes her work. Both sides are probably right, which is, not ideal for settling arguments. But at least Lydia keeps her opinions to herself. The next follower on this list has plenty of opinions, and she's not remotely shy about sharing them. Mjoll the Lioness? Up until now, most of Skyrim's female followers have had one thing in common. They don't really care about anything. They stand in taverns, they wait in guilds, they exist in a holding pattern until you show up and give their life purpose. Mjoll the Lioness is the exact opposite. She cares about everything, loudly, constantly, to the point where you almost wish she'd stop. Mjoll lives at the Bee and Barb Inn in Riften, which is basically the moral sewer of Skyrim. Thieves Guild running the city, corrupt politicians, Maven Blackbriar pulling strings from every direction, and Mjoll hates all of it. She's not quietly disapproving. She's not writing a strongly worded letter. She is vocally, aggressively opposed to the corruption eating Riften alive, and she'll tell you about it within 30 seconds of meeting her. Here's the thing, you can't just recruit Mjoll by talking to her. She actually has a companion quest where she asks you to retrieve her lost sword, Grimsever, from a Dwemer ruin, and this is where she separates herself from basically every follower we've covered so far. She has stakes. She has a history. She lost something important in a place that nearly killed her, and getting it back actually means something to her. You bring back Grimsever, she trusts you enough to follow you. That's more narrative depth than Lydia has received across 14 years of existence. But the real reason Mjoll stands out is her philosophy. Her entire backstory is that she used to be an adventurer. She traveled, she fought, she saw the world. Then she ended up in Riften and watched it rot from the inside. Every guard in Skyrim took an arrow to the knee and accepted their fate. Mjoll took the same metaphorical arrow and said no. She refuses to sit down. She refuses to stop fighting. Where Lydia silently carries your burdens with passive resignation, Mjoll loudly refuses to carry the burden of living in a corrupt city without doing something about it. She's also marriable, and her marriage dialogue actually acknowledges that she's a warrior with an independent life, not just a spouse generator, which is, the bare minimum. But in Skyrim, that counts as revolutionary character writing. The community loves her for exactly these reasons. She has opinions. She has a moral compass. She has a quest that creates genuine emotional investment before she ever picks up a sword for you. Mjoll is the first follower on this list who feels like she was written as a character first and a gameplay mechanic second. But if you think Mjoll's dedication to a cause is impressive, wait until you meet a follower whose entire identity is built around devotion to something far older and far stranger than any Thieves Guild, Aranea Einith. Every follower we've covered so far has been pretty straightforward morally. Warriors, mercenaries, hunters, guild members. None of them ask you to question your own ethics just by recruiting them. Aranea Einith changes that immediately. She's a Dunmer priestess, stationed at the Shrine of Azura, perched on a frozen mountaintop south of Winterhold, and she's devoted her entire life to serving a Daedric prince. Not a divine, not one of the 8, a Daedric prince. And the only way to recruit her is by completing Azura's quest yourself. But here's the catch. You have to choose to return Azura's star to the shrine in its original form rather than keeping it as the Black Star. Only if you side with Azura does Aranea stay loyal and become your follower. So, by the the time she joins your party, you've already done a Daedric Lord's bidding, which is, not ideal for anyone role-playing a righteous hero. Here's the thing though, Azura isn't your typical Daedric prince. She's not Molag Bal. She's not Mehrunes Dagon trying to rip a hole in reality. Azura is widely considered one of the more benevolent Daedric princes, if benevolent Daedric prince isn't a complete contradiction in terms. She's the prince of dusk and dawn, prophecy and fate, and the Dunmer people have worshipped her for thousands of years across Morrowind. So is Aranea a dangerous zealot, or is she a genuinely faithful woman serving a deity that, by Daedric standards, actually cares about her followers? The game never gives you a clean answer, and that's what makes her interesting. Her dialogue reveals someone who's wrestled with doubt. She talks about moments where her faith wavered, where she questioned whether Azura's visions were real or just her own desperation. But she stayed. She kept the shrine. She waited in the freezing cold for the person Azura told her would come. That person being you, apparently. Mechanically, she's also a breath of fresh air. Aranea is a dedicated mage, specializing in conjuration and destruction magic, making her one of the few followers in the entire game who will actively summon Atronachs to fight alongside you in combat. After 7 entries of sword swingers and axe wielders, having someone conjure flame Atronachs while hurling lightning bolts feels like a revelation. Her Dunmer speech patterns and constant references to Morrowind theology give lore fans something genuinely substantial to engage with. She's not just a companion, she's a walking piece of Elder Scrolls religious history. But if you think a Daedra worshipper raises moral questions, wait until you meet the next follower, because she worships something far, far worse. Iola. So after Aranea's quiet moral gray area, let's talk about a follower with zero gray area whatsoever. Iola is a Breton woman you meet during the Taste of Death quest in Markarth, and she is a cannibal. Not metaphorically, not in some vague Daedric corruption sense. She eats people, and she'd like you to join her for dinner. Here's how you recruit her. You investigate reports of something disturbing happening in Markarth's Hall of the Dead, where you find Iola casually hanging out among the corpses. She tells you about Namira, the Daedric prince of ancient darkness and revulsion, and invites you to participate in a ritual feast at Reachcliff Cave. The feast, by the way, involves sitting down at a table and eating a dead body. Not a cutscene, not implied. You, the player, press a button and consume human flesh at a dinner party with candles, which is, not ideal. But here's what makes Iola genuinely unsettling rather than just shock value. She's calm, she's articulate, she doesn't cackle or rant about darkness. She frames cannibalism as a spiritual practice, a form of worship to Namira, a liberation from societal taboos that she considers arbitrary. She talks about consuming the dead the way a monk talks about meditation. There's no guilt, no conflict, no inner turmoil. She has made complete peace with eating people, and she thinks you should too. Her combat setup matches her personality perfectly. She's a magic user, favoring destruction and conjuration spells alongside one-handed weapons. She fights with the same quiet efficiency that defines her character. Gets close, gets the job done, moves on. I don't know what to tell you about the implications there. The community is genuinely split on Iola. One camp celebrates her as the darkest, most unique roleplay option in the entire game. You want to run an evil Dragonborn playthrough? Iola is your ride or die. She's the companion that lets you lean fully into the nightmare. The other camp argues that making a self-identified cannibal who has killed and eaten people into a recruitable follower crosses a line the game didn't need to cross. That her cheerful philosophical justifications normalize something that should stay firmly in the absolutely not category. Both sides have a point, but neither changes the fact that Iola exists as a test. She's the game asking you exactly how far you're willing to go for a companion with good stats. Every other morally questionable follower in Skyrim gives you plausible deniability. Iola doesn't. You sat at that table, you ate that corpse, you recruited her anyway. But if you think dining with a cannibal is the darkest corner of Skyrim's follower system, wait until we talk about someone whose entire existence is defined by being completely forgettable. Iona is the follower equivalent of a glass of water. There's nothing wrong with her. She's fine. She's perfectly adequate. And that's the most damning thing you can say about a character in a game full of cannibals, werewolves, and Daedric cultists. She's a Nord housecarl assigned to you in Riften, granted once you become Thane of the Rift. Her whole deal is loyalty. She serves the Thane, she guards Honeyside, and she wants to help the Dragonborn carry out whatever mission they're on, which, depending on your playthrough, might mean slaying dragons or might mean stealing every wheel of cheese in Whiterun. She doesn't judge. Her combat setup is actually pretty solid for what she is. Steel armor, one-handed weapons, and a shield, making her a straightforward sword and board tank. She can block things and hit things, which is more than most followers bother with. The heavy armor proficiency especially sets her apart mechanically as a damage sponge, even if the game never really leans into it narratively. Here's the thing about Iona though. She exists in the same game as Lydia, who became a meme because of her passive-aggressive, "I am sworn to carry your burdens," and Mjol the Lioness, who lives in the same city and has an entire backstory about losing her legendary sword in a Dwemer ruin. Two followers you can compare her directly against, and Iona got the version that's just generically loyal. No memorable dialogue, no dark secret, no personal quest, just a woman who serves her Thane and waits in Honeyside, which is, not ideal for making a memorable character. Her dialogue barely extends beyond standard housecarl lines and basic acknowledgments. You can marry her, and she'll function as a spouse, which creates some convenience if you already own Honeyside, but that's about where the depth ends. The real problem is location. Riften is packed with content. The Thieves Guild, Maven Blackbriar's schemes, Mjol's entire storyline. Iona got lost in the shuffle of a city that already had too much going on. She deserved more writing. She just never got it. But if Iona represents duty at its most generic, the next follower represents duty at its most thankless. Jordis the Sword Maiden. Here's a fun experiment. Go ask 10 Skyrim players if they've ever traveled with Jordis the Sword Maiden. 9 of them will squint at you like you just made up a name. And honestly, that's fair, because Jordis is locked behind enough progression and gold that by the time she's available, most people have already committed to someone else entirely. Jordis is a housecarl, appointed to the player after becoming Thane of Solitude, and getting that title requires purchasing Proudspire Manor, the most expensive house in the entire game at 25,000 gold, and completing a series of favors for the people of Hafingar. That alone puts her deep into a playthrough. We're talking dozens of hours minimum before she even spawns in your house, standing there with a sword and shield like she's been waiting for you to remember she exists. Her combat style is straightforward. One-handed weapon, shield up, heavy armor. She fights like someone who read a manual on how to fight and followed every instruction exactly. No flair, no surprises, just solid fundamentals. Which is, not exciting, but it's reliable. The real issue with Jordis isn't quality, it's timing. By the time you've scraped together 25,000 gold for the most expensive property in Skyrim, helped out Solitude's citizens, and earned your Thane status, you've already got a companion. Probably one you've been running with for 40 hours. Maybe Lydia, maybe Aella, maybe someone you've accidentally grown attached to because they've been carrying your 47 cheese wheels across the entire province. Jordis shows up to the party after everyone's already gone home. She's got decent stats, solid combat AI, and she's marryable, but nobody knows that because nobody meets her. Community discussions about Jordis almost universally center on one theme. Wait, who? Players who do recruit her generally report she's perfectly fine. Not exceptional, not terrible, just a competent warrior who had the misfortune of being the last one picked. She's the participation trophy of Skyrim followers. She earned her spot, she just earned it too late for anyone to notice. But if Jordy suffers from showing up at the end, the next follower has the opposite problem. She shows up and absolutely refuses to be ignored. Serana. Every single follower we've talked about so far has had some version of the same problem. Shallow dialogue, no real arc, a personality you could fit on a sticky note. Serana has none of those problems, and that's exactly why she's last. You find her in Dim Hollow Crypt during the Dawnguard DLC, sealed inside a stone monolith where she's been sleeping for thousands of years. The exact timeline is fuzzy, but we're talking somewhere in the range of several centuries to potentially over a millennium, depending on how you interpret the lore. She's the daughter of Lord Harkon, a vampire lord, and her mother Valerica. Her vampirism itself traces back to Molag Bal, which is already more backstory than most followers get in their entire existence. You free her, she joins you, and from that moment on, Skyrim becomes a fundamentally different game. Here's the thing, Serana has an enormous amount of recorded dialogue. To put that in perspective, most base game followers have maybe a dozen lines total before they start repeating themselves. Serana has entire conversations about her family, her trauma, her centuries of isolation, her complicated feelings about vampirism, and her philosophical struggles with mortality and purpose. She doesn't just talk at you, she talks with you. Her responses change depending on your choices, your quest progression, and how your relationship with her develops over time. She has opinions, she has moods, she reacts to weather, to locations, to things you've done 3 quests ago that you forgot about. But here's where it gets complicated. Serana isn't just a good follower. She's the only follower in Skyrim with an actual character arc. Her personality shifts, her dialogue evolves, She starts guarded and distant, carrying centuries of family trauma like a suitcase she refuses to put down. And over the course of the Dawnguard questline, she opens up, she becomes warmer, she cracks jokes, she trusts you, and that progression isn't scripted in a straight line. It responds to what you do, your choices during the DLC shape who she becomes, which is something literally zero base game followers offer. She's also one of the most emotionally developed companions Bethesda has built, with a relationship that grows through dialogue and shared experience over the course of the DLC. Not a generic wear an amulet of Mara, and she'll agree to marry you situation. An actual slow burn connection that develops through conversation and trust. But here's the kicker, you can't actually marry her. She turns down the proposal. The game builds what feels like a romance and then doesn't let you seal the deal, which drove the modding community absolutely feral. Exclusive to the DLC, exclusive to her frustration. Combat-wise, she runs destruction and conjuration magic with full vampiric abilities. She raises the dead mid-fight. She's not gonna die walking into a bandit camp because she decided to fistfight a bear. She's competent, which is, a nice change of pace. Now, let's address the elephant in the crypt. Serana is proof. She's proof that Bethesda knew followers could be better. They knew companions could have real dialogue, real arcs, real emotional weight. They knew the system could support a character who felt like an actual person instead of a combat mannequin with 4 voice lines. They built that character. They just put her behind a DLC paywall instead of in the base game. And that's the tension that defines every conversation about Serana. A significant chunk of the fanbase views her as the single greatest companion Bethesda has ever created and demands they expand her content further. They want more followers like her, more depth, more dialogue, more development. But there's another side to that conversation, and it's harder to ignore. Because every hour of dialogue Serana has, every choice that shapes her art, every moment where she feels like a real character, it highlights exactly how little effort went into everyone else. Her dialogue volume alone exceeds several base game followers combined, not individually, combined. Serana is the answer to every complaint about every follower that came before her. No personality? She has one of the most developed personalities in the entire Elder Scrolls franchise. No romance? She has the closest thing to a real one, even if the game won't let you finish it. No arc? Hers changes based on what you do. She's what happens when Bethesda actually invests in a companion. She feels like she belongs in a different game entirely. And maybe that's the real takeaway from every female follower in Skyrim. The system was never broken, it was just empty. Bethesda proved with one character that they could fill it with something extraordinary. They just chose not to do it for anyone else, which makes the base game's companion writing feel less like a limitation and more like a decision. And I don't know what to tell you about that one. If you enjoyed this video and want to see every Dragon Priest in Skyrim explained and ranked, click the video on the screen now.